Good chunk of us do believe it's due to the rise of social media. This comes as the Salesforce CEO declared that Facebook is the new cigarettes.
That's
and
right.
What a headline that makes.
It certainly did. It went around the world. Mark Benioff argued that it can have very serious effects on society in the same way that cigarettes can. It's addictive, it's not good for you. This is him talking. There's people trying to get you to use it, and you don't even really understand what's going on. The government needs to step in. The government needs to really regulate what's happening. So, joining us now is the former CEO of Facebook Australia, Stephen Shearer. Stephen, thank you very much. I should say you're also the CEO of the Digital CEO.
Yes.
So thank you very much for joining us. I mean, these are some strong words by Benioff. From somebody who's been inside Facebook for a long time, what did you make of them?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Benioff's a great entrepreneur. I have a lot of respect for Salesforce, the business he's built. And definitely he has strong opinions about a lot of things, and I think this is one of them. Yeah, I don't know whether Facebook is like cigarettes. I think that's going a little too far, but I think there is an addictive nature to social media. I think there's no denying it. Now, how far addictive goes, scientists and psychologists can tell you, what defines the addictive behavior. But I would caution that there's a lot of things in our lives that are addictive that aren't as bad as cigarettes. That's sort of the catch-all that we talk about when we talk about addiction. But, I remember a phase in my life where I spent too much time watching sports on television, which was addictive. And I certainly didn't want the government to step in and regulate how much I could watch sport. That was up to me. And so I think there's something about Facebook that is around personal choice still, that I think asking government to regulate how much time I spend getting posts from my family and friends, I think it's still a little bit of a bridge too far.
Yeah, I mean, is it part of the business model to be addictive, having worked inside Facebook?
It's part of the business model to get people to spend more quality engagement on Facebook. Now, quality often does equate to time. And this is something that Mark and the Facebook leadership have struggled with the past couple of years. Is it just more time that people are spending on the platform, or is it the quality of that time? Now, the quality is a very hard thing to measure and to optimize for. And I know the business is struggling to figure that out because they recognize that quantity does not equal quality. Now, that is true, but at the same time, when you're doing things like you're building an advertising-based model, naturally having more time that people are spending gives you more time to put ads into people's feeds. And that's how that's the way Facebook makes money today. And unfortunately, Facebook hasn't found another way to monetize other than advertising. Advertising is the way we monetize so much in the world today.
So, Stephen, we're spending a lot of time in this place that Facebook has created. I mean, it's hard to know if it's quality time, sure, but we know the kinds of people and the kinds of things that are being said in there as well. There's also been a lot of criticism of Facebook for not doing more to stop against toxic speech, hate speech, these sorts of things. Yeah. I mean, how difficult is that to control from Facebook's perspective?
Yeah, it's easy to control a chunk of it, and it's hard to control the long tail. And the challenge is when you're talking about artificial intelligence, which is if you're working on the scale, the size of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, you need AI to help remove inappropriate content, however you define it. And unfortunately, the AI today, the current state of AI, is only so good to be able to remove so much. So even if it could remove 99% of 1 billion posts a day that might be inappropriate, I'm just tossing out a number, that still leaves millions of pieces of content that are potentially outside of the guidelines that Facebook wants on the platform. And that's where you need human beings then to look at that. And it is hard to remove it. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is not an easy task. It's something that no company's ever had to face in the history of media.
Yeah, and even though you said, it's probably a bit of a stretch to say Facebook should be regulated, could it be regulated? I guess is one of my questions. Because Mark Benioff was talking about, in kind of doubling down on this cigarette idea, he said, there was a point for the tobacco companies too, where basically the government had to step in and regulate, and he sees this as no different, basically.
Yeah, and look, he could be right about this. We may be going to a future where we'll look back and say, hey, this was the point at which regulation of social media started. But I think the question is, what do you regulate? So if it's, as I say, if it's posts and news from your family and friends and how much time you spend on that. If you spend a lot of time on that a day, do you want the government stepping in and saying, no, you should only be spending 25 minutes a day, not 45 minutes or 55 minutes? And I would say most of us would say no. When it comes to data privacy and data security, I think there probably is a role there. We're seeing it now with what's happened in the European Union, which is essentially a regulatory regime around data privacy. If it's around types of political content or public speech, that again becomes a bit of a question mark, because do you want the government or do you want Facebook controlling what it is that you see in your feed in terms of public commentary? that becomes a dangerous place as well. And we've lived in societies where free speech is largely considered to be the way that we should regulate our society and our democracy. Yet here, people are really advocating by saying, no, we should restrict that freedom of speech. It's an easy thing to say, regulate social media, and I think there needs to be some steps taken, but it is not an easy problem to solve.
This feels like it's all coming to a head a bit now. I mean, because this incredible power is wielded by what is essentially just companies led by people. I mean, last week we had a 6,000-word report come out from the New York Times about the various issues along the way for Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty damning stuff. I suppose, first of all, did you read it? And I mean, did it kind of make sense to you from what you saw on the inside?
I read it, and look, I wasn't there during a lot of the period they spoke about in the article, and I wasn't in some of the meetings they discussed. But I can tell you that Facebook's, like any company, has struggled with a tsunami of bad news. And I think some of the leaders of Facebook probably have reacted in ways that, in retrospect, they would say, hey, they shouldn't have reacted that way, a little more defensive than they should have. But, in defense of Facebook, I think they are dealing with a challenge that no company has ever had to deal with before. Now, that doesn't mean what they are doing is right or wrong. I'm just saying it is a challenge. No business has really had to deal with the scale of information management, if you will, that Facebook's had to deal with. And it's something that's happened so quickly. Remember, 2004, Facebook didn't exist, right? And here we are in 2018, and we're talking about over 2 billion people.
And I always think this is a guy who just started in his dorm room, and he's still there, in front of, giving testimony in front of Congress. Yeah. Like, there's no way he can be, able to cope with that responsibility.
I can't. You see it in Mark. Yeah, you see it in Mark even when he's testifying. As good as his testimony, I think it was pretty good. But you could see he didn't understand everything that goes on inside Facebook.
Like, he must just think, seriously, I just started in the dorm room. I don't know.
There's probably there's not anybody who understands certain things in terms of how the algorithm works to affect the interface with society. That's the thing that's happening now with these AI-based systems. Facebook's probably the most prominent example. But they're now starting to interface with more analog, organic, slow-moving systems, and democracy is one of them, right? Democracy it was designed 200 years ago. It really hasn't changed since. And you could argue that the way democracy is set up now, these AI-based systems like Facebook, it's not Facebook intending it, but the way the systems are being used in ways to kind of really game democracy. And that's a real challenge for us, I think, in terms of how we think about what is the future of the democracy we build in every country.
So as a halfway point, something I saw interesting that Mark Benioff was asked in that same interview is, okay, so do you think tech companies need chief ethical officers? Would that be some kind of point in the meantime, considering that, the ethical and humane use of tech that they're building, or would that just be kind of ticking the box of we're dealing with it?
Well, exactly. A chief anything officer can be ticking a box, depending on how accountable they are, how much the board has to listen to what they say, what do shareholders want, what's the government asking them to do.
Because if it's a culture inside Facebook, which is what this article has been about, then maybe that doesn't help at all.
But I will tell you that from what I know my time inside Facebook, the culture of Facebook is very leans. This is genuinely true. It leans on the side of Facebook wants to do good for humanity. And this, a lot of people roll their eyes. But I was inside Facebook. It was absolutely tattooed on everybody from Mark on down. Now, that can be naive. And I think some of it is coming out as naivete, which was Facebook generally believed that, hey, if we open the world to communicating together, everybody's going to say good things. And the reality is, there's lots of bad people in the world. There's bad actors. There's bad speech.
In fact, some people say the system now rewards the bad actors.
I think in some ways it does when you look at how the algorithm works. There are problems with that, and Facebook, I think, has been trying to deal with that. How does content that just attracts more eyeballs is not necessarily the best or most appropriate content to be shared?
I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about Facebook as being naive. I mean, I heard the TED talk you gave a little while ago about the youth of Facebook. Obviously, it's a young company, but all the people in there are young too. So does that tie in here? And I mean, at the top of the tree is this 34-year-old person who founded this company, hasn't really worked anywhere else. So do you think he's still the best person for the job? And do you think that they need to get a bit more old hands in there?
Yeah. I think Facebook is still best run by Mark Zuckerberg because I think we need to give Mark. I think generally Mark needs more time to kind of show that he can solve these problems that Facebook has. I think he's the best suited to do it now. Now, if we're back here a year from now and Facebook's had another year of scandals and hasn't moved forward, you can ask this question again: is he still the right guy to go for? I think right now he is. But I think this question of experience is a really interesting one because On the one hand, Facebook hasn't faced a lot of these types. No company's faced the kind of crises Facebook's had. On the other hand, there is a lot of inexperience inside the business in terms of there are not people there who've been through the wars and the scars of going through other crises of other nature, and they don't know how to necessarily react and deal with it. And I think that butts up against some of the naivete that still exists within Facebook that is now being dispelled very quickly. And Facebook's going through these on a massive scale, these growing pains from an adolescent business to an adult business. And think about all the things you did as a teenager that you wouldn't want to be splashed all over the world. Well, sure. Facebook's kind of going through that right now. It's got to kind of sort itself out as an adult company.
Yeah, well, they're the ones splashing everyone's adolescence all over the internet.